Shadow Harvest, Past Now. Read presents another entry in our anthology of stories that need to be told. Shadow Harvest. If you have a story that needs to be told, email it to stories@pastnowread.com. If you like this story, stay tuned each Thursday evening for the next episode. Now, Shadow Harvest. Enjoy. I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped into the pasture. My prize bull, 1,200 pounds of muscle, the backbone of my breeding program, lay crumpled in the grass, his tongue blackened, his eyes glassy, foam still clinging to his mouth. The air stank of rot and chemicals, though there shouldn't have been anything but fresh hay and lake wind here. I dropped to my knees beside him, pressing a hand to his hide. Still warm. Whatever had killed him had done it fast. Too fast. Word spread fast in ranch country. By dusk, neighbors were calling. Same story. Perfectly healthy cattle, dropping like flies. No broken fences, no predators, no bad feed. Just sudden death. And panic. I thought of the land beyond my fence line. The one we'd all wanted for decades. Rolling grass down to the lake. Water that never ran dry. But we couldn't touch it. Not at the price the owner demanded. Until one day, foreign buyers appeared, cash in hand. No hesitation. They said it was for soil research. Nobody believed it. And as I stood over the carcass of my bull, I knew where every trail led. Straight to that land. The land grab. I couldn't get the bull's eyes out of my head. Animals don't just fall dead in the pasture, not like that. The vet came by at dawn, crouched low with her stethoscope and samples kit, her face pale in the early light. She ran her gloved fingers along the bull's jaw, pulled a vial of blood, scraped soil into a sterile tube. I watched her closely, trying to read her before she said a word. She didn't. Not at first. Finally, she looked up at me. "This isn't natural," she whispered. Her voice carried a tremor I'd never heard before, not even during the worst calving seasons. Something foreign. Engineered, maybe. I'll need to run tests. Engineered. That word hit like a branding iron against the chest. By evening, the talk had spread from ranch house to feed store. Everyone knew which piece of land cast a shadow over all this. The lakeside spread. 3,000 acres of perfect grazing, land that could have doubled any of our herds. We'd chased it for years, tried pooling offers, begged the old family that owned it. But they always laughed. Not for sale. Until one day, it was. 2 years back, slick buyers showed up out of nowhere. Chinese, or at least that's what folks said. No hesitation, no negotiating. Paid more than double the asking, wired the money overnight, sealed the deal before any of us knew what happened. We assumed they were after water rights, maybe speculation on some future development. They claimed it was for soil research. Said they were academics mapping nutrients, advancing agriculture. The excuse felt thin, but none of us had proof otherwise. Now, standing in my barn as the vet laid out her findings, strange compounds binding to grass DNA, resistant to heat and rain. My stomach knotted. "You're saying it spreads?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "If this is what I think it is, once it leaches into the lake, it doesn't stop at cattle." Her eyes met mine, and I could see the fear there, naked and unguarded. I thought about the base just across the ridge, radar domes glinting in the distance. about the new fences and cameras that had gone up around the research site, about how quiet those buyers had stayed ever since. The land wasn't just bought, it was occupied, and every dying cow was their message. The sick herd. The screaming started before sunrise, cattle bawling in pain, a sound I'd never heard from them before. Low, guttural, like the earth itself crying out. I sprinted across the pasture, boots hammering frost-stiff grass, and when I reached the herd, my stomach dropped. Dozens of cows staggered, foam bubbling at their lips. Some collapsed, legs kicking violently before going still. Their eyes rolled back white, their hides slick with sweat though the morning air cut cold. This wasn't disease. This was an execution. I grabbed my radio, voice shaking. They're down. Half the herd is down. By the time the vet pulled up in her truck, dust trailing behind her, I'd lost count of the carcasses. She leapt out, scanning the field, face tight. "This isn't spreading from animal to animal," she said, crouching over a cow that had just fallen still. "It's the grass. The toxin is binding at the root level. Every bite is a death sentence." I stared at her. "You're saying the land's poisoned?" She nodded grimly. "More than that. It's designed to replicate. Rain spreads it. Runoff carries it straight into the lake. Once it's in the water table..." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. I knew what that meant. Our herds were just the beginning. Dairy, feedlots, meat processing plants, all tied into national supply. One crack in the chain and the whole thing falls. Fear licked at my throat, but something else surged beneath it. Rage. Generations had built this land, fought droughts, floods, markets collapsing, and now some unseen hand had decided to weaponize our soil. The vet's hands trembled as she packed her kit. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she admitted. "But whatever this is, it's not from nature. It's engineered, lab-grade precision. This kind of work doesn't happen without money and intent." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking. "Intent to do what? Starve us? Or worse?" she whispered. Her eyes locked on mine, unflinching now. "Make us sick. Imagine a pathogen tailored to spread through the very food we eat. It wouldn't just cripple ranchers. It could topple an economy, a nation." Her confession lit a fuse in me. But behind the anger was something else. Something I hadn't expected. Fear for her. She was risking her career, maybe even her life, just by speaking these words aloud. We stood in silence as the cattle moaned and the morning sun crept higher. And then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Just 3 words. "Stop asking questions." The base connection. The roar of engines woke me in the night. I shot upright, heart hammering, and peered out the window toward the ridge. Headlights cut through the darkness in convoy. 3 trucks, heavy rigs, grinding down the dirt road toward the fenced compound by the lake. I grabbed my coat, boots, and rifle and slipped out into the cold. The moon was thin, clouds streaking fast overhead, perfect cover. My breath fogged as I crept along the fence line, keeping low in the brush. The trucks hissed to a stop at the compound gate. Guards stepped out, American, not foreign. Their uniforms were blank, no patches, no rank. One keyed the lock, and the convoy rolled inside. I crept closer. A buzzing filled the night air, sharp and mechanical. I looked up. Drones. 4 of them. Their red eyes scanning the ground in perfect formation. They weren't hobby drones. These were military grade. quiet as owls until they were directly above you. I froze in the brush, heart pounding. One passed overhead, beam slicing across the pasture. For a moment, I thought it had me, but it moved on, chasing something deeper into the grass. I crawled forward another few feet, straining to see. Through a gap in the fence, I caught a glimpse inside. The compound wasn't just soil labs, it was storage. Steel tanks, massive, bolted to reinforced pads, pipes running underground. Symbols were stenciled on their sides, biohazard warnings, labels in both Chinese and English. Then I saw the screens inside one of the trailers. Rows of monitors, graphs in cascading green lines, soil analysis, microbial breakdowns, satellite feeds feeding data into a pulsing AI model. It was running simulations, predicting how toxins would spread, which counties would fall first, how many head of cattle, how many people. It wasn't about cattle at all. It was about us. I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo through the fence, then ducked back as headlights swept my direction. The drone's beam fixed on the ground just feet from me, and I bolted, crashing through brush, branches tearing at my face. "Movement!" a voice shouted. The crackle of radios followed. My lungs burned as I sprinted toward the ravine. Bullets snapped through the night, one sparking off a rock inches from my head. I slid down into the gully, mud soaking my jeans, and crawled on hands and knees until I reached cover beneath the trees. My phone buzzed with a new text, the glow lighting my face. "We see you." The betrayal. I barely slept after the chase. Every rustle in the trees sounded like boots. Every flicker of headlights on the distant highway made my heart pound. By morning, I knew one thing for certain. Someone local had sold us out. The crisis came before I could drink my first cup of coffee. A pounding at my front door rattled the glass. I grabbed my rifle and cracked it open, only to find my neighbor, a rancher I'd trusted since childhood, standing on the porch. He looked worn, eyes dark like he hadn't slept either. "You need to stop," he said, voice flat, no greeting. "They know what you saw last night. If you keep digging, you won't just lose your herd, you'll lose everything." The way he said they told me all I needed to know. He wasn't warning me out of kindness. He was delivering a message. I felt the floor shift beneath me. This was a man I'd shared fence lines with, swapped tools, sat next to at auctions. Now he was working for them. "You're one of them," I said quietly. His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. "It's bigger than you realize. They've got money, power, protection. You push this, you'll end up in the ground." Before I could answer, the vet stormed up the drive. Her face was pale, eyes blazing. "You coward," she snapped at him. "How much did they pay you to poison your own neighbors?" His hand twitched toward his jacket pocket, and I saw the outline of a pistol. I stepped between them, rifle at the ready, and for a second, the world held its breath. Then he lowered his eyes, muttered something about trying to survive, and backed down the steps. He left without another word, his truck spitting gravel as it tore away. The vet turned to me, trembling. "You don't get it," she said. "If he's involved, others are too. This isn't just foreign sabotage. It's collaboration. American hands are in this." I felt the weight of her words, and I hated that I believed them. That night, we pored over her lab results again. The toxin wasn't random. It was CRISPR modified, precision altered to latch onto specific plant genes. I recognized some of the signatures. They matched research I'd seen once in a government journal. But the funding lines, those weren't foreign. They were American defense contractors. It hit me like a punch. This wasn't just a foreign plot. It was a joint operation. A test. Our land was the lab. Our cattle were the subjects. The vet gripped my arm, her voice a whisper. If they're this far along, the next phase won't be about cows. It'll be about people. The words had barely left her lips when the night outside split open with light. Headlights flooding the windows, engines rumbling in the yard. They'd come for us. The break-in. The roar of engines outside wasn't a bluff. By the time I grabbed my rifle, beams of light were cutting across the living room. I pulled the vet toward the back door and we ran for the barn, boots pounding dirt. A spotlight swept the yard. Federal order! Open the door! A voice thundered through a megaphone. But these weren't feds. I knew that in my bones. We slipped into the barn, the sharp stink of manure and oil filling my nose, then out the rear gate into the tree line. Branches clawed at our arms as we pushed through. The woods swallowed us, but the dogs were loosed within minutes. Their barks snapped like gunfire, closing fast. We didn't stop until the lights of the compound burned ahead, glaring like a city dropped into the countryside. Fences ringed the property, cameras humming on their poles. The vet gripped my arm, her breath ragged. We have to get inside. Proof is the only way we survive this. It wasn't bravery driving us. It was desperation. We cut the chain on a service gate, hearts hammering, metal groaning as it gave way, and slipped in. The compound reeked of chemical tang and diesel, a stench that burned the back of my throat. Trailers lined the yard, their windows glowing sickly yellow. Past them, the steel tanks I'd glimpsed before loomed massive, condensation dripping like sweat down their sides. We ducked into a trailer. Banks of servers hummed hot and low, filling the air with ozone. The vet slid into a chair, fingers flying across a greasy keyboard. Lines of code spilled onto the screens. An AI model blinked to life, simulating infection curves not just for cattle but for humans. Counties, then states, then coastlines turned red like a spreading fire. She whispered, voice trembling, "This isn't sabotage. It's wargaming. They're stress testing how fast they can break us." Bile rose in my throat. I yanked open a cabinet, rows of sealed vials clinking faintly, folders thick with stamped seals, data drives stacked like candy. Proof. Enough to burn the whole thing down. Then the alarms shrieked. Red strobes strobed the room in violent flashes. The door slammed open. 2 men in tactical gear stormed in, rifles raised, the smell of gun oil rushing with them. I shoved the drives into my pocket as one barked, "Hands up!" The vet froze. Terror etched across her face. My finger tightened on my rifle's trigger, sweat slicking the stock. Every instinct screamed to act, but there were too many. And one of them said my name. They blindfolded me, dragged me out into the night, and when the cloth came off, I was lying in the dirt miles from home. My rifle was gone. So was the vet. I staggered back to my ranch at dawn, the silence heavier than any weapon. Half my herd lay dead. The rest looked hollow, already fading. Neighbors avoided my eyes. They knew, or maybe they feared knowing. The drives I'd pocketed were still there, somehow missed in the chaos. Proof. Data that could expose everything. But as I scrolled through it, my gut twisted. Because some of the names tied to the project weren't foreign. They were American. People in power. I tell this story now because silence is what they count on. And if you ate beef this week, if you drank milk, if you trust your food, you're already part of their experiment. You have been listening to Shadow Harvest, produced and adapted for audio narration by PastNowRead. Stories that need to be told. If you have a story that needs to be told, email it to stories@pastnowread.com. Please subscribe, like, and hit that bell for future updates. If you like this story, stay tuned for the next episode each Thursday evening. Follow for more. If you like our stories, please tag with someone who may also like PastNowRead, stories that need to be told. Thank you. All content and images are copyrighted by Phone House, LLC. 2025, all rights reserved.